Hello, this is Sue. I'm going to show you some fun things you can do with watercolour and a variety of leaves. And this first thing I'm going to show you is really just to show how watercolour works. And so we're going to use leaves as the subject for playing with the way the water enables the pigments just to mingle freely by themselves. And I've put out here a few little squeezes of tube watercolour. If you've got watercolour in pans, that's fine. And you don't need a lot of colours. I'll talk about the colours in a moment, but first I'd like to draw some leaves. You don't need to be worried about not being very good at drawing, because I'm going to show you that if you get a leaf that's the right size for your piece of paper, like that, let's just get it at a nice angle, you can kind of draw around it, which is what I'm going to do here, just to get the shape correct. So just getting a rough idea of how it's going to work. There. So once I remove that, I can now look at my leaf and remember, or look and see that that's where the stalk goes. And I had one lobe of the leaf coming out like that, and another one coming out down there. Okay, I don't need to be very precise about this, and I'm trying to draw quite lightly so that the pencil marks won't show up through the paint too much. So let's bring that over there, bring that to a point, and that went like that, that went like that, like that, and there we have a leaf, which isn't too bad a representation of that. So we're now ready to paint that leaf, and I'm going to show you that the water does most of the work. So all you need is a jar of water. You need some paints. As I said, you can use them off the pan, those little dried blocks. Here I'm going to use liquid paint, and I'm just using an ordinary white plate for mixing. Now I've got all sorts of lovely other shapes which I'll come to, and I'm just going to move them out of the way of my hand and have my little palette here. So a brush, water, and the paints. Now the paper I'm using is watercolour paper. You want something that's reasonably stiff and strong, ideally watercolour paper, because it's treated in such a way that the paint doesn't just sink in. Something like typing paper might be a little bit flimsy, but see whatever you have. Now I'm first going to paint my leaf with water. And I've got a little bit of tint on my brush, which is enabling me to see where the water's going. Otherwise, if you've got a light on, you'll find that you'll be able to get the shine from the water to show, because you don't want any little dry patches on your leaf. So I'm covering the whole leaf with water. Okay, going fairly quickly so that the first part doesn't dry out before I've got to the whole of the leaf. Okay, nice and wet. Now, because this is watercolour paper, it's treated with what is called sizing, which is a medium which stops the paint from just sinking into the paper. If I were painting on blotting paper, it would all be gone already. Okay, so there we go. We have it evenly coated, quite wet really. I'm just taking off the excess, and now we're going to paint. Now, I rather like the purpleness of that. Now, I don't have any purple paint here. What I have is some red and some blue, and that may well be enough, although I've got a sort of goldy colour which I may decide to bring in. Now I'm not going to paint this, I'm going to touch the paint into the water and let the water do the work. So just touching there, and look, off it goes. Okay, let's put some over here, and off it goes, all by itself. And let's put some over here, and it's just flaring in the water. Now, because it's going into water, it's being diluted and it will fade as it dries. Now I'm going to bring in some blue, and let's put the blue here and there. And you see, I'm not driving the paint around, I'm just touching it. And here, because I didn't rinse my brush, the red and the blue are mixing on the brush, but I'd actually like them to mix on the paper. So let's get some blue, and you see, if I tilt this ever so slightly, they'll flow around. I don't want to tilt it too much because I don't want everything just to smush together just yet. But also it shows you that where the paint goes is where it's wet. And if you see there, if I'm tilting it, unless there's a great big dribble, it stays where I put the water. So I'm just continuing to put some paint here and there. And then I'll do a little bit of tidying up in a moment. Okay. Right, that's starting to be quite pleasant. Now, because I can see that these have got tiny little serrations on the edges, I can just come around and make little flicks. Because everything's still wet, it'll all blend. Let's do the same here. Let's come back in with the red. And you'll see why it's necessary that there are no little dry patches, because then you'll just get a little white area instead of painted. Now do you see, I'm not driving my brush backwards and forwards. I'm only touching into the water and allowing it to travel all by itself. And that is the magic of painting with watercolour. And we're nearly there. Okay, we might want a little bit more paint towards the centre, although I rather like that paleness. I might just drop in the odd little bit of paint and allow it to spread all by itself. If I want to mix it now, I can just flow it and let the water carry the pigment. Okay. And although this part is pale here, it's not because I used any white paint. It's the white of the paper showing through, and that's another element of watercolour, that you don't generally use white paint at all. You allow the white of the paper to show through. I haven't yet done my stem. I'm just trying not to put my hand on what's wet. Let's see now. Let's put a nice little curve on it and just let it connect. And there we go. And I can just touch in here and there a little more. And then that just needs to be allowed to dry.